Okay.
So that brings up a great story for flood insurance. What year were you born? You're a young man.
So it's funny you asked that only because 94. So I spent the first 21 years of my life with no Blue Jays in the playoffs. And of course, we got the great news last night.
God,
but
this kid.
but continue.
Wow. So we bought our house in 2007. Again, rural property. And I don't know if you've heard of Katrina. You're old enough to remember Katrina, the hurricane that happened in the U.S. I remember setting up my TV and getting the antenna set up. Okay, not satellite. Set up to the local station and getting it all set up, and they were showing scenes from Katrina from the U.S. And I remember hearing that most of these people don't have the necessary flood insurance, and none of this is going to be covered by insurance. And I'm sitting there in my living room going, I wonder if I have flood insurance. So I called my broker the next day and said, I'm just curious, do I have flood insurance? And he laughed and said, Mike, you live on a mountain. Do you really think you're going to have any flooding? And I'm like, humor me, because I just want to know how much more would it cost to have flood insurance. And do you know what it was like for the whole policy for the year?
Just for the flood insurance?
Just for the flood insurance.
Where you are, I don't know, maybe $40 to $60.
It was $35.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'll take the flood insurance, please. Like, I'll take it. So fast forward to 2012. It's just my wife and I that live at the house. And we rarely go downstairs. Like, we have the cold cellar and stuff. And it is a fully finished basement and everything. And we have a big family, so we used to have family gatherings and stuff that we would have. But very rarely we would go downstairs. What ended up happening was our sump pump failed. And we had heavy rains. We hadn't been downstairs in 3 days. So we did some grocery shopping, and I go to take some stuff down to the downstairs freezers. I turn on the light, and here's 2.5 feet worth of water in my basement. And that was a $35,000 claim that went through because the sump pump had failed, and we had the flood insurance, which covered it. So just some more news that, all these little add-ons, it's important to ask these questions and talk, because I know in Hamilton, they had a big thing a few years ago where we had some major, or last year or the year prior, where we had some major rainfall, and a lot of homes got flooded from sewer backup, right? Do you recall that?
Yep.
And a lot of these homes, that wasn't covered, or there was a big battle as far as who was going to cover the cost. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Sewer backup in particular is a coverage that I would say not a ton of people have. Our brokerage offers it to absolutely everyone, of course. Not everyone purchases it, and that's okay. Homeowners are entitled to kind of decide what they want to cover and what they'd be happy to take care of themselves. That's completely fine. But the problem is that sewer backup is excluded from your policy unless you purchase that coverage. It's the same as your flood conversation there. In that case, because it's an exclusion from the policy, and when you buy your home insurance, you're signing a contract which includes what's excluded and what's covered, you're kind of locking yourselves in, and it makes it hard to make the argument that it should be covered, right?
Right.
Now, the other thing I like to always say, and our team tries to keep this philosophy at heart, is that the average person shouldn't have to know everything about insurance. That's what your broker's for. That's what your insurance agent is for. You want to work with someone who's going to be able to make those recommendations. Sure, you live in an area where floods are extremely unlikely, but it still happened.
Right.
And if you hadn't been watching the TV that day and thought to add the coverage, it sounds like you might have never had it.
I never would have had it.
And that's a lot of money you would have been out of pocket for $40 a year.
Absolutely. So the long story here is, because you keep mentioning your broker, but how many people actually have brokers? A lot of people are doing it themselves.
Yep.
They're going online. They're trying to save a buck here or there. And hey, every dollar counts. Don't get me wrong. But this is the danger of not having someone knowledgeable. It's no different than getting, trying to do lawyer work through ChatGPT. Like you're not dealing with the professional. Yeah, you can get all of the ideas and the thoughts, but you don't have the experience or the knowledge of the professionals. And it's so important to, as far as I'm concerned. Now, you guys have taken my whole portfolio on. So we got 7 vehicles through the business and for our personal. We've got the business insurance. We've got the farm insurance, the house insurance. Like, there's all kinds of coverage that we have to cover ourselves. And this all stemmed from a relationship that I had with another brokerage firm for years that I started up and worked with them since my inception in 2004. And I built a relationship where I just relied on them and said, you know what, I trust you. You have my best interest at heart. So just take care of me. And then 2 or 3 years ago, I guess it was 3 years ago, maybe, or two and a half, they reached out to me to say, we can't get you farm insurance anymore. We just don't cover it. We have no one that takes care of that. So, you're going to have to find somebody else. And that's when I reached out to Duliban, because they actually provided me your company's contact info. And from there, I found out that I was woefully underprotected on various coverages for both my business and my insurance, including my overall, if my business has a fire or is shut down, we need to have coverage based on what our sales are. Mm-hmm. And they had us down for what we are doing basically in a month for the entire year. And that would have absolutely bankrupted this company and put us in absolute peril. And you guys caught that. So I'm so thankful for Duliban and your guys for stepping up, and Adam in particular, and Josh, taking care of me and making sure that I have the proper coverage. And now passing the torch on to you, and being a great guy, willing to come onto this podcast and speak your mind on behalf of the company. I mean, that's awesome. But I guess the bottom line is making sure that we have a relationship with a brokerage firm that's going to have your best interest, because it's not easy. I can't imagine it would be easy for you to take care of me. and I'm, me being the great driver that I am, and my wife is watching, and listen, I am a great driver. So, but you're not just taking the first company that comes along, right? Like, what is the process for those that own their own business? Because we do have some shop owners and business owners that are watching this, hopefully. What is the process that is typical for a firm like yours to, if you are looking to take me on and I say to you, look, I'm looking to get my insurance through you, what is the process? What's involved?
Well, we certainly appreciate the kind words you shared there. Absolutely. I think it's
well deserved.
When we appreciate that very much, and I just wanted you to know too, like it does mean a lot. You and I have had this conversation. No one loves talking to anyone about insurance, and I think that's completely fair.
You're in the same class as mechanics,
exactly.
And that's very low. That's just sorry. That's just painting us with the broad brush. Nobody trusts mechanics, and nobody likes insurance brokers or lawyers. Like, we're all in the same pot.
That's right. And it's a shame, only because insurance, just like your auto repair, is so important. But I think what happens is, and this is not necessarily a terrible thing, you go a really long time without a claim, and you kind of forget what the insurance is there for. A lot of people do. Before I was a broker, I was guilty of the exact same thing. You're paying into something every month or maybe once a year in a big lump sum, and never really seeing anything back for it other than those pink slips that come in the mail and your paperwork and maybe a yearly conversation with your broker, if that. For a lot of people, they don't necessarily see the value until they have a claim.
Right.
And on top of that, claims are also really terrible to deal with sometimes.
They're terrible to deal with.
So, Now you've paid for something for years, and let's say after a decade you finally have an auto claim and it doesn't go all that well, which does happen.
That does happen.
What I'm trying to get to is that you really want a broker who, when it comes to that claim, can step in and go to bat for you on your behalf. No disrespect to any of the direct rating companies. That's your Bel Air Direct. That's your Desjardins. When you're working with an insurance agent, they only work for that one single company.
Right.
They don't have necessarily as much incentive to leverage their relationship with you as a client to kind of fight for you with that company. And again, I don't want to throw insurance agents under the bus. They just do things in a different way. But if you called in tomorrow and had a claim and it went terrible, the first thing I'd talk about doing, other than getting the claim, corrected and sorted for you, let's go and have a crack at some other insurance companies and see what they can do for your business. And that's what I can do as your broker, is represent you in that way.
Awesome.
My hope is that the claim never gets that bad in the first place, but it's nice to know that there's those options. So when you call our brokerage, or let's say you walk into the office, or maybe Mike gives you my card and you give us a call, we just want to start with an honest conversation about what your business is, who you are as a person. What have you got at home that you're looking to purchase insurance on? You've got multiple vehicles, you've got a property, you've got the garage and your business insurance, some other things going on as well. What does that all look like? What's the reason that you're calling us? Why are you shopping these policies? How long have you been with your previous company? What's the big motivator for you? You had a very specific motivation. A lot of people call because they're just checking in on pricing, and that's okay too. That's completely fine. That's what we're happy to help with. Like I said, we work with 24 companies, so we'll send out a submission to as many of those companies as we can. Not all of those companies do garage insurance in your case, but the ones that do, let's let them take a crack at it. We'll go back and forth for you. We'll negotiate. We'll get the coverages and requests and recommendations that we want to make to you as a broker, like your flood coverage, your sewer backup, your business interruption. If there was ever, knock on the table on wood somewhere, a large fire that affected your business, those are the recommendations we want to make. Now, if you don't purchase all of those coverages, that's okay, but it's our job to make those recommendations to you so you know what's out there and what's not out there.
So how much coverage is too much coverage for a business? Is there a sweet spot? Is there a sweet spot? Because I know when you present to me and you say, this is the different coverages and, this covers this covers this. I have two business insurance policies through you. One covers the garage and the other one covers, what is it?
So the garage policy mostly covers your client vehicles. So they pull up onto your property to, let's just say, even just get an oil change.
Sure.
While it's in your care, custody, and control, that's what they call it. That policy is covering that client's vehicle almost as if it was your own. So it's going to cover the things like a collision. So let's say a distracted driver is coming down your road here, comes up over the curb and clips one of your client's vehicles. That would be covered, okay? A fire, a theft off of your lot, which is covered under your insurance policy. Those are the big examples. Your commercial insurance is really covering the interests of the business. So that would be all of your tools, all of your equipment, the setup we've got here for this podcast, actually, the stuff here in your break room, also your liability. So if someone came onto the property and, let's say, unfortunately, maybe you hadn't cleaned up the ice and snow as good as you should have, slip and fall, that's a really common claim. That would arise from your commercial policy, not the garage.
Gotcha. And so there is no sweet spot. It all depends on each individual business.
That's right. And I always tell my clients, your business is your livelihood for most of our clients. I would say all of them. It's your livelihood. It's your pride and joy. It's the thing you work for every day. I work with farmers and small business owners and medium-sized business owners and construction companies and things like that. They're all very different, but ultimately what we want to recognize is how important it would be if it went away.
For sure.
And that's what the insurance is for. And, what your broker and what I want to do as your broker is help you see that value in between those claims. And hopefully the claims never happen, but we need to show why the insurance is worthwhile, even when things are going right. And in this case, with your kind words, we appreciate that we were able to do that. And it means a lot to us to hear for sure.
I'll be sure to add your information in the podcast clip here so that anybody that wants to reach out to you or your brokerage will be able to do that.
Yeah.
What's the most overlooked coverage for Canadian businesses fail to protect themselves against? What would you say?
You actually mentioned it already, which is that business interruption coverage. So I think a lot of people and a lot of business owners, you can kind of immediately visualize what you'd need to replace if you had a large fire, let's say in this building. The building needs to go back up first and foremost. You've got to buy your tools and equipment again, and your lifts and your hoists and all of the different supplies and stock and inventory that you have to carry just to be ready to have a client drive on the lot.
And this doesn't happen right away.
Right.
This takes months, if not years.
It does.
Am I correct?
And that's why the business interruption is important. You know, let's say even the next day they start putting your building back up. As you mentioned, it's probably going to be, which isn't
not
going to
here
happen.
in Oakville. Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
completely fair. But let's say in a perfect world they do. They show up the next day and they start clearing everything out to get it going back up again.
Yeah.
It's still going to be several months that your business can't operate. Business interruption, there's a few different forms of it, and I won't go into too much detail, but the idea is it protects you after the claim incident and until things are back to normal. It allows your business to continue operating or at least get the revenues that you'd be missing, right? So that way, when everything is ready to go again, you're not in a position where you're bankrupt. You
Right.
can actually get back to operating and operating normally. One thing that is useful for a policy like yours, and this is a coverage that you had, whether or not you'd use this coverage is up to you. Let's say you had a significant loss here. Let's use that fire example. We'll keep with it. And it was going to take 6 months to repair the shop. You could actually use that coverage to rent out another shop if you wanted to keep working on client vehicles. You know, and I know that if a client can't come to you for service, you might have a great relationship, but they're going to go somewhere else.
They have to.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure, they have to.
And if you can find a way to keep operating, even rent out a couple bays in a garage somewhere to just help out your key clients, your core client base, that's so important to businesses to be able to do that.
That's awesome. So is there a difference between tenant insurance, for a leased property or even, for those that are in an apartment? Like I never even thought of that for for your personal, a lot of people have, a rental, but they don't carry insurance.
Yeah. And that scares me a lot for a couple of reasons. Not every landlord in Ontario requires tenants insurance. That's okay. I disagree with that choice. I think they should require it. And I think that anyone who rents...
I would think that it was mandatory.
It's not for tenants policies.
Well,
it's very
insane.
common. It's very common for sure. If you're a tenant and you're renting somewhere and you don't have insurance, tenants policies typically start at $8 to $10 a month. They're very, very affordable. You're not only covering your contents and your belongings, you're also, and it's sometimes tougher to explain because I think there's a big misconception about this. If there's a fire on your property, let's say you live in a single family dwelling and it burns to the ground and you're renting it, your landlord's actually not responsible for putting you up somewhere else. If you have a tenant's insurance policy, it gives you access to something called additional living expenses. That allows you to go rent a hotel for a year, go rent another unit for a year while your landlord's getting their home rebuilt under their insurance. If you don't have a tenant's policy, you don't have access to that coverage. You're just out on the street looking for another place to rent.
This is amazing. That's the second part of this honest to God podcast that I had no clue, and that is great. You auto know that for sure. Like honestly.
Yeah, I didn't know it before I got into insurance either, and I think that's what I want to stress is that most people don't know everything about insurance. Even brokers don't know absolutely everything because there's just so much to know. But
of course,
you want to partner with someone who can make those recommendations and review what you've got going on and how to insure it.
So with more severe storms, floods, and fires, are Canadian businesses underestimating climate risk? Because you mentioned hail earlier, like theft here, we bring every vehicle inside that we can overnight and they're locked up secure in the building and we don't leave vehicles outside. We do have a full camera system and full lighting system. I mean, it's like a ballpark out there at night, like nice and bright. So, and we're in a generally secure area as far as I'm concerned. But what concerns me more is like hail damage, windstorm, trees falling down on cars. We do have a big tree out front, like that sort of thing. That, is that covered generally in most policies, or is that more in the fine writing in the?
Yeah, in for a garage like yours, or even just for a general business, let's say it's a little retail store, those are coverages that are typically going to be included. But I always want to stress it's very important to review your policy and have that conversation with your broker. Talk about those hypotheticals, talk about the situations you've maybe had in the past and how they would have been covered under your current policy. Sometimes when you switch companies, the forms and the wordings look a little bit different. So it's very, very crucial to review how those specific wordings respond to any given situation. And, we could sit here and go through 100 specific claim scenarios, but ultimately my advice on all of them would be, if you don't check in on those coverages, I think it's better to assume you don't have it, because if you plan to have that coverage and you've never checked in to make sure you have it and your broker's never recommended it, which would be a terrible thing, you won't be covered. And that could be a significant loss. When it comes to, the climate and the worsening storms, the insurance companies have an awful lot of data, unfortunately, that shows that these, what they're calling adverse weather events, are getting worse and worse and more frequent as well. It's just going to keep happening from the looks of things. It's a great time right now to check in on your policy, do that full top to bottom file review, tear it down to the studs and pick it apart, and just spend a few hours thinking critically about what's going to happen if the worst happens.
A lot of people would rather watch paint dry. I'm sure.
I don't blame them.
Because the wording in a lot of these policies is large and honestly misleading. I don't want to say misleading, but easy to not understand. A lot of the wording is very legal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I prefer having you come directly to talk to me and just tell me in layman's terms what we're dealing with, which is always a benefit. So,
well, I appreciate that too. And like I said, I've been an insurance broker now for just about 3 years, actually. And a lot of this stuff is new information to me being in the industry. It's a pleasure to get to share it because it's some scary stuff when you really start to think about it. If you don't want to spend hours thinking about your insurance policy, and ultimately who does?
Who does?
At least flip open, go into your wordings and just look for the page or two that has your exclusions. What are the things that are specifically excluded? If you look through that list and there's something that concerns you, you need to call and see if there's a way to purchase coverage there.
It's good advice.
In Canada and Ontario specifically, there are general exclusions that are on every single insurance policy. So that's things like nuclear warfare, civil unrest and disobedience. Yeah. Recently, insurance companies have added a virus exemption from COVID-19. They've changed their wordings to exclude that. Very important to dig into that list, though, and see if there's anything that you could see happening, to your business, to your home. See if there's an option to purchase that coverage.
So we touched on in our conversation before we started the podcast about you brought me a package for cyber insurance. Now, is that just an upsell or an oversell? Because, I'm just a little business.
Right. I think there's an assumption, and it's mostly fair, that only big businesses get targeted. But as a broker and as someone who works with people in the cybersecurity industry, because we do work with a company called Box Insurance, and they're specialists in this sort of thing, increasingly they're seeing small businesses being attacked because, unfortunately, small businesses are less likely to be prepared, both from a personnel perspective, but also from a cyber perspective, to respond to those kind of attacks, either on their systems, whether it's data infiltration, stealing important client data. You're a garage. I'm sure you don't keep detailed social insurance numbers and stuff like that of every client, but you certainly would keep probably their name, phone number, address, and details about their vehicle at the very least.
Yeah.
That's still private information that the customer expects you to hold on to. And I think that's fair as well. Cyber insurance is still really new, so it can be tricky to talk about in terms of where the value is for a business owner. But the unfortunate news is that cyber insurance or cyber claims are the fastest growing claim category in Canada, is my understanding. And a lot of it is even people's personal devices being infiltrated and money being stolen. That's 1A on the list, unfortunately.
And I deal with a company called Nerds on Site, and I've been dealing with them for a number of years. And we've set up the shop so that we have different internet connections for our guests, the shop, and the staff. Just specifically, and there's a whole, they have a system called Atom that we're protected through that covers a lot of this breach possibilities. But one of the interesting things was finding out that they were setting up the different zones for the staff, the shop usage, and the customer usage, which I never realized, what a difference that would make. So is a lot of this coming from the States?
Honestly, no.
No?
It's fun to pick on the States for a variety of reasons, but a lot of this stuff happens in Canada as well, and it's happening increasingly here too. I think as a country, not even just insurance related, we often kind of rest on our laurels a bit and say, yeah, but that's in the States, that happens in the States.
That's easy to go to. That's easy to go to.
It is, but the bad news is that it's happening here. It's happening to businesses that you visit. It's happening to businesses of people you know. It just doesn't make the news because small business stuff doesn't make the news, unfortunately. When a large mega corporation gets a cyber breach like the city of Hamilton,
Of course.
that's in the news. But when the mom and pop shop around the corner, a great little family business, gets, extorted for $60,000 to get their systems back, that doesn't make the news, but it's absolutely happening.
And that's interesting. Is coverage a lot different in the U.S. than it is Canada? Do you know that answer as far as who has it tougher? A broker in Canada or a broker in the U.S.?
I think it's a little bit tougher in the U.S. for a couple of reasons. One of them is they're a little bit more sue crazy down there. They love to be in court, and it's happening more here. I'm not going to pretend it's not.
Right.
We are getting more litigious in Canada. But the other thing is, in states like Florida and California, it's now next to impossible.
It's more by state, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. They're like they have their own little countries. Like it's
Pretty well. Yep.
And I only go to that because part of my insurance coverage for my vehicles, for my shop vehicles, we travel to the U.S. for training on occasion. And Derek's going to be going next month to Maryland. And I had to get specific coverage from a specific insurance company that would cover my vehicle to travel to Maryland.
Yeah, a lot of Canadian insurance companies are not very comfortable with commercial vehicles like yours. Their personal vehicles, as you know, it's not like a Savannah 3500.
Right.
But they are used commercially. They're used as part of the business and then going to the States. Now, a lot of companies aren't okay with that US portion of it. And the biggest reason, there's a lot of reasons, but the biggest reason is if you get in an accident down there, you're probably getting sued. Almost certainly. Up here, it's a lot less likely. You typically only see the suits if it's a pretty dramatic incident,
Right.
To put it politely. But down there, I mean, you could rear end someone doing 10 kilometers an hour and you're probably going to get a letter in the mail. The insurance companies know that, unfortunately, and it's a little bit scary. Personal use, though, insurance companies know we live in a kind of a border area. We're close to the U.S. border relatively. I grew up in Fort Erie, which is right on the border with Buffalo. We used to go over to the States every weekend to do grocery shopping.
Right.
That's fine. It's just that
Before our dollar was only worth 70 cents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You could go over there and fill up
Tariffs.
the car with groceries and then fill up in gas as well and save a fortune, but not anymore.
Right.
But yeah, if you have commercial vehicles that are going to the States, super important that you check with your insurance company that is covered. They could actually decline the claim.
Does it help if you contact I'm planning a family trip to Florida, let's say, and I'm taking my kids and my wife and my dog, and we're going to go cross border. We're going to go to Florida. Does it help if I let my insurance company know that I'm headed to Florida?
It doesn't hurt, just in case, if anything does come up while you're in Florida, it makes it a little bit easier to navigate that situation with you. But ultimately, no, you don't have to let us know as long as it's for pleasure use. You're taking the family on a
Right.
trip to Disney or wherever it may be. That's going to be covered under your policy. The standard insurance policy again, definitely in Ontario, and I believe Canada-wide will cover you Canada and U.S. mainland.
Well, me being the 20-plus driver that I am, my rating, okay, I let my insurance company know that I was doing my Route 66 tour, which turned into a 14,000-kilometer trip instead of the standard one because we went down to Texas and we drove around, but we had a great time. But I just wanted to make sure that they knew that I was going to be crossing 6 different states and 2 countries before I went. So overly cautious or not, I think it did, as you say, it didn't hurt.
That's exactly it. I think don't think of it as overly cautious, because that's something pretty extraordinary that you've done. You know, you didn't just run over for gas and groceries into
Right.
New York State. You went on a
16 day,
multi-week,
16 day trip. Sure.
Now, did you get your vehicle's oil changed halfway through that trip? That's a lot of kilometers.
It is a lot of kilometers, and I'm going to say no, I did not. No, I did not. Thanks for bringing that up. You ought to know. Make sure you get your oil changed, especially on 16,000 kilometer trip. But I did 14,000 kilometer. But we did it just before I left, and as soon as I came back. So GM will still be okay with it, I'm sure.
Good.
So on a morbid twist, what happens for an insurance or a business owner like me with insurance if I pass away unexpectedly?
So from your insurance policy perspective, there's not a lot of help that comes from your insurance policy in that situation.
Is my business still covered?
Yes, but
see, there's hesitation. This
yes,
is where I'm
but
getting. Yeah, here we go.
It's very important that as a business owner, you have a contingency plan and a business continuity plan in place before the worst happens. You know,
Okay.
you want to have your documents drawn up and you want to make sure that everything's lined up. The reason being is that as the business owner of Urban Automotive, your contract with the insurance company is between you as the business owner and the insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
If the business then passes on to someone else in the family or maybe even an employee, something like that, the policy actually needs to be rewritten so that it's a contract with that person instead. Obviously, the named insured of the business is not changing. It would likely stay Urban Automotive Inc. or XYZ business.
Right.
But who is actually insured changes. So it's really important if you're a business owner and you haven't thought that through, it's a great opportunity to chat with your insurance broker,
That's
with your
three
agent.
great points. 3 great points on this podcast.
Yeah. It's a great opportunity to just check in what would be needed. Typically it's going to be, a will and business documents and business continuity plans. It's a great thing to include in your conversations.
So should small businesses be worried about employee-related claims? Injury, harassment, or customer-related claims?
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on the industry, I think there's a lot of different exposures that are out there. There's abuse exposure in a lot of places. There's theft and crime exposure. As a business owner, you want to be concerned about your employees stealing from you, which hopefully would never happen, but we know that it does. People coming onto the premises and potentially being harmed inadvertently by your employees, that's always a possibility as well. That's why it's really important to have those liability limits that are appropriate for the size of your business to make sure that if someone does bring a lawsuit against you, because it does happen in Canada, trust me, it does, that you have sufficient limits both to get the lawyers on your side, which is what your insurance company's for, but also to pay it out if there is a valid claim there too.
Wow, I never even thought of that.
Yeah.
In your opinion, are Canadian insurers adapting quickly enough to new business models like gig work, remote operations, and AI-driven companies?
Yes and no. I'll be as generous as I can be and say that we're a bit of a smaller country still, which means that our insurance companies only have so much data to work on.
Okay.
But they need to get that data up to date and accurate to make sure that the things that are happening now, which is the gig work, like you mentioned, the Ubers of the world, they need to be able to insure those things. And the good news is they are. Have they done it maybe as quickly and efficiently as possible? Probably not, but that's only because insurance is very much a reactive industry. They can only react to the data that they have, and it's hard for them to predict with data that they don't. So Uber is still, it's probably been in Canada for about a decade now, which is crazy to say.
Has it been that long? Really?
It's got to be at least 7-8 years, I would think, for sure. But
now, I know Uber's a very reputable company, and I know we've done a lot of work with Uber drivers. If you're starting up an Uber, a lot of people don't realize that they have to put their vehicles through inspection. So we have to do the provincial inspection on the Uber vehicles, and that's a cost that a lot of people don't take in. They think that they're just going to become an Uber driver, get a plaque, and be able to drive. Well, no. You need to have a certificate provincially provided saying that your vehicle is safe to operate on the road. So I'm assuming the same would be for insurance for the Ubers. So when we're sending customers off in an Uber, we can be rest assured that customer is covered under that driver's insurance,
Yes.
because they would have to pay. Now, is just touching on that, is being an Uber driver obviously changes your personal rate to more of a commercial, because you really are a commercial rate that you're taking now passengers, and you're at a higher risk. We're going to lose our camera again here, it looks like. So
I think it's interesting because policies for Uber, let's use that as the example, they actually are a personal lines policy. So even though it's got that little bit of commercial exposure to it, it is still a personal lines policy, but it's a little bit different from your commuter vehicle or your pleasure vehicle that you drive on the weekends, because you're in it a lot more. You're doing it for work. You might have paying passengers in your vehicle. You might be doing deliveries. Those are all things that just keep you on the road more, and they make you a bit of a higher risk. It doesn't mean you're a worse driver. It just means that you're more likely to be in an accident because you're on the road for 8 hours a day. You and I, we drive to work. Let's say we're on the road, for you, maybe about 2 hours a day. For me, let's say an hour a day at max. That limits our time on the road and limits the risk. If either of us started driving 8 hours a day, that's really 8 times more likely that we're in an accident.
right.
Yeah, there's Uber does require the driver to prove insurance, is my understanding, before they can sign up on the platform. And there are Canadian insurers who are equipped to provide that coverage.
Awesome. Austin, I want to thank you for your time and for coming out today. We appreciate it. I've lost my cameras again, and I don't want to do a third part of this podcast. I know that it's still recording and it can still be heard. We do have this on Spotify as well. So for those that are watching this or listening to this on Spotify, they didn't notice anything. But unfortunately, those watching on YouTube, we've lost the cameras. But I want to thank you again for your time, your knowledge, and your wisdom, and I will include your information with this podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's always great to chat with you about insurance and about everything else too. So this was a lot of fun, and I looked forward to it, and we'll have to have me back maybe next year.
I meant to say, if we have you back again, you wouldn't say no?
I would absolutely say yes. I'm thinking we could do a monthly segment.
Oh, cool. Even better. Awesome, Austin. Thanks very much.
Cheers.